that or mic's on?
Morning. Good morning and welcome to the launch of Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the launch of Section 75 Data, a signposting guide. My name is Patrice Hardy, and I work for the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland, who's hosting this webinar this morning. We're obviously all in very difficult times with the current health pandemic, and it's within that context that we're delighted that so many of you have registered and are attending the webinar this morning when you're very busy and stressful working lives. Before we get into the main content of today's webinar, I just want to highlight that your microphone and your video are automatically turned off, so we won't be able to see you or hear you. However, you can interact with the speakers this morning by using the chat function on this platform, and depending on your view, it's either along the top or along the bottom of your screen, and it'll look like a speech bubble with a question mark in it. If you click on that, to the right hand side of your screen, the chat function should appear, and please don't hesitate to send in questions as they occur to you throughout the session this morning, and colleagues will be looking through those questions and feeding some through to our brief question and answer session. Unfortunately, we won't be able to cover all of the questions this morning, but we will do our best to look at all of them received and to feed back some information based on those questions to all attendees. The aims of our webinar this morning are that attendees will understand the need for and uses of Section 75 equality data, and that you will be aware of what are the key content areas within this new data signposting guide, and our speakers will cover a lot of that today. And we hope that it will motivate you to use the Section 75 data signposting guide and all of the associated resources that we will email out to you after today's event. Many of you will have seen the structure for today's webinar already, having seen the agenda that's been sent out. But the structure involves 6 speakers. We have a lot to pack in. Our first speaker will be Dr. Evelyn Collins on the importance of equality data. Siobhan Broderick from the Executive Office will cover the civil service perspective on Section 75 data. I will cover what your equality scheme says about Section 75 data and also what's in it for you in terms of the signposting guide. Eileen Crone from NISDRA will cover how to access NISDRA Section 75 population data. And Deborah Howe from the Commission will cover what policy and research data the Commission has. Dr. Estelle Lowry from Queen's University will cover the Northern Ireland Longitudinal study. And then we'll have some time for question and answer, and then summary and next steps. And we will close the session at 12 o'clock. Without further ado, I will hand over to Dr. Evelyn Collins, the Chief Executive of the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland, who will set the scene and talk to us about the importance of equality data. Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you, Patrice, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this official launch of our Section 75 Using Evidence in Policymaking Signposting Guidance. It's my pleasure to open the webinar this morning and to welcome you all, albeit virtually. We're very pleased to have developed this signposting guidance in partnership with NISDRA, the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency. We really trust it will support public authorities to collect and use equality data in developing policies in line with the requirements of the Equality and Good Relations duties set out in Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act, and also that it will assist good evidence-based policy making. Our aim is that publishing this guidance will encourage you through signposting a wide range of sources of available and relevant information to complete the work that is necessary to ensure effective compliance with the Equality and Good Relations duties. We in the Commission have long identified the need for robust equality data in Northern Ireland and highlighted its importance for the implementation of the duties and for evidence-based policy making. We've consistently recommended that public authorities use and collect, where necessary, detailed equality information to inform public policy making and service delivery, so that equality considerations are at the heart of public policy making, informed by the needs and experiences of people using public services, including those experiencing inequalities on a range of equality grounds. Good equality data is important to support public authorities to pay the appropriate level of regard to equality of opportunity required by the Section 75 duties when revising and developing policies. Public authorities, as you all should know, should be assessing equality impacts of policies being reviewed or developed by conducting screening and equality assessment. And this includes assessing any adverse impacts and seeking opportunities to better promote equality of opportunity before the policy is decided upon and implemented, as well as introducing monitoring arrangements to monitor by equality ground the impact of policies adopted. It's obvious that in order to do this effectively, public authorities need good information to ensure that decisions on equality assessments are evidence-based and appropriate. Now, the type and volume of such information should be relevant, appropriate and proportionate to the policy under consideration. The sources of information you may need may be at population level and/or at organisational level. They may be quantitative, they may be qualitative. Indeed, in some areas, qualitative information may be particularly useful where the policy under consideration is of a sensitive nature or where there's a lack of quantitative data. And indeed, we recognise and have long sought to highlight the lack of equality data generally, and have been concerned to highlight that some of our data sets, official data sets, are not disaggregated by equality ground, and that is regrettable in respect of policymakers in Northern Ireland. And I think over the last year in particular, the COVID-19 pandemic, not only has brought inequalities in our society into sharp focus, but it's also highlighted, particularly with analyses from elsewhere, including in Great Britain, that there are differential equality impacts of the virus across a range of grounds. From the information and data that is available, it appears the pandemic is reinforcing existing health and other inequalities, and we've raised specific concerns regarding the non-availability of certain data which the pandemic has highlighted here. One example, for example, is the Department of Health COVID-19 dashboard data, which includes important information on impacts of the virus by age and by gender, but not by race or disability. This contrasts with the position in Britain, where data is collected on race, and we see a very differential impact on Black and minority ethnic communities there. And that's helped the Westminster government to focus attention on what is needed and what steps are needed to address that particular issue. So we've highlighted consistently the need for good equality data as a vital component to inform public policy responses to the impact of the pandemic, whether in health or, for example, in education, for example, on equality outcomes for children and young people by equality ground, with the different assessment procedures in place last year. This mirrors recommendations we've made over the years. For example, in respect of the programme for government, we've highlighted that PFG measures should be tracked for impact on equality grounds, and also that the PFG should include actions to address gaps in equality data to ensure that data is sufficiently disaggregated to allow for meaningful equality analysis to better inform public policy development and service delivery. But the fact that there are some gaps in equality data should absolutely not deter you from seeking and using the data that is available from a wide range of sources to support you to comply with your Section 75 duties, to pay due regard to the need to promote equality of opportunity and regard to the desirability of promoting good relations, a legal requirement on all public authorities and a vital means to ensure that equality and good relations considerations are actually at the centre of public policy making and service delivery to the benefit of all of us in Northern Ireland. So thank you for the few moments I've had to introduce this important webinar. We have a number of speakers this morning, as Patrice has outlined, to share their expertise and also their perspectives on equality data, which I trust you will find both interesting and useful in your work. And I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker of the morning, Siobhan Broderick, who is Head of Equality, Rights and Identity in the Executive Office. Over to you, Siobhan. Thanks.
Morning. Thank you, Evelyn, and good morning to everybody. As Evelyn has already said, she's given me my full title there, but within that division of equality, rights and identity, there are a number of teams responsible for equality and human rights, the language commissioners, identity and cultural expression, and delivering social change. I also serve as the Executive Office's diversity champion within the Civil Service Diversity Champions Network. This is a cross-departmental group which considers what the civil service needs to do to ensure diversity and inclusion is firmly embedded across the service. So I'm the chair of the TEO Diversity Action Group, which aims to identify issues which affect diversity within the daily working life of the department. So that's sort of like an in-looking group of a group of people within the department and across the civil service, looking at ways the civil service can improve in respect of diversity. I have been asked to speak briefly in respect of how Section 75 sits with policy development within the civil service. The civil service also has a policy champions network made up of senior directors from across all departments. It aims to seek out new and innovative approaches to developing policy, as well as identifying ways to support policymakers to ensure that they are equipped with the knowledge and skills they need to do their job to the best of their ability. There is available to civil servants an internet site developed by the policy champions, which provide policymakers with advice and guidance required to develop, review and implement policy, as well as information and links to detailed guidance on legislation and Section 75. And I would recommend colleagues within the civil service that they go and look at the site. So what is a policy? Sort of the starting point of the discussion this morning. A policy, in essence, is how government delivers a desired change or outcome. So a policy must be, among other things, evidence-based, and Evelyn already mentioned that, and of course inclusive. It may build on similar policies and learn lessons where things have gone wrong or could have been done better. Therefore, it is critically important that the policymaker understands the area. To do this well, it is important to talk and engage in an open and inclusive way with stakeholders, and I think early and ongoing engagement is critical in developing policy. Indeed, this principle was recently endorsed in the New Decade New Approach, which has just reached its first anniversary. That agreement says that the principles and practice of citizen and community engagement and co-design will be a key part of the development and delivery of the programme for government and its supporting strategies. This engagement is part of and informs the policymakers' consideration of the Section 75 equality duties, which is obviously why we're here this morning. The Section 75 screening and equality impact assessment forms are in themselves important policy development tools. They aid the policymakers' identification and consideration of relevant equality and good relations evidence, or just as importantly, if there's any gaps, the consideration of the needs and challenges faced by the Section 75 categories, and importantly, in a more positive way, to consider the opportunities that the policy will allow you to promote equality and good relations. So I've been involved in policy making for many years, and it is critically important for policymakers recognise and welcome the clear added benefits that consideration and application of Section 75 brings to policy making. The tools and guidance provided by the Equality Commission in respect of the section are very beneficial, and to these is now added this new signposting guidance, which is being launched today. I'm sure colleagues are familiar with the Guide to Public Authorities in respect of Section 75. In fact, I'm sure I have it actually beside me. I keep it beside me on my desk, which walks policymakers through the screening process in a user-friendly way. As you know, where a screening exercise identifies a need for an equality impact assessment, this process will consider the issues more deeply and set out the reasons for arriving at decisions to proceed with the policy, or how it is to be amended to address the inequalities identified. Despite time pressures, equality must not be seen as an add-on or a tick box exercise. It is an important part of the policy cycle. Timely and proper use of the equality assessment tools provided by the Commission leads to better policy making and can help to avoid complex and costly legal challenges in the future. In order to properly inform policies and screening exercises, quality data is vital, but it can often seem hard to find the most relevant information. NISRA is the principal source of official statistics and social research in Northern Ireland. The data sets they produce cover a wide range of themes, including health, education, environment and agriculture, economy, population, transportation, tourism and leisure. NISRA services are available to government departments and non-departmental public bodies, as well as councils, to assist the policy development process and delivery of their business objectives. And indeed, most departments will have a team of statisticians sitting alongside them, and they're critically important to befriend. Eileen Crone will be speaking to us a little later, and she will be able to provide more details about the work of NISRA. Another useful data source is the Open Data NI portal, which has been created to facilitate easy access to Northern Ireland public sector data for both reuse and redistribution. It also contains a wide range of data sets available from across the public sector. The data is not of sensitive or personal nature, but is the raw data that drives the public sector and its services. It can be useful for investigating how effective policy changes have been over time. Charities and stakeholder groups, the third sector, can also be very good sources of research and information relating to specific Section 75 groups. This Section 75 using evidence and policy making signposting guide that we're here to launch is a great place to start the research and search for relevant data. It contains a host of helpful links to organisations that hold relevant data and statistics. Developed by the Commission in conjunction with NISRA, public sector organisations and the Civil Services Equality Practitioners Group, it also provides insightful information on the role of evidence and policy development. And Evelyn has just touched upon this, but we're all aware of the importance of population data as the basis for developing policy, but we must also recognise the importance of organisational level data. This may be information which is already available from within public authorities and may be of more relevance than population level information. It is likely, depending on your policy, that you may need both organisational and population information to assess and monitor the impact of your policy. Hopefully, through the use of relevant and up-to-date evidence, policymakers will be able to ensure that policies are targeted, equitable and inclusive. Everyone in society will have been considered and reasonable steps taken to ensure that they are treated fairly. Of course, the policy cycle doesn't end when a policy is launched. It is vital to ensure that it actually leads to the intended outcomes. For this reason, monitoring is essential, and not just the outcomes, but also the equality impacts. Organisations must ensure that they fulfil all of their monitoring obligations to ensure that no inequalities have occurred, and if it appears that they have, the measures must be taken to mitigate them. So to finish, a few tips. Remember, every public sector organisation has an equality scheme which states how it will fulfil its equality duties. So make sure you've read it and you understand what you're required to do through your policy journey. Use the equality screening forms and impact assessments as tools to ensure fairness for all affected by your policies. Use the Section 75 using evidence and policy making, the signposting guidance, as a starting point for identifying sources of data. And I would also add to that, speak to your statisticians. Use your organisation's equality team for advice, and don't forget to monitor the outcomes and the equality impacts of your policies. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all, and I'm going to pass you back to the host, Patrice.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. That was really helpful to have the support of the Executive Office for this guide, but also for reiterating that Section 75 is a policy development tool to help policymakers, and also for highlighting the open data resource, which is within the guide that we're launching today. So thanks again for that. I am now going to cover what your equality scheme says about Section 75 data, and also what's in the guide for you, what's going to be useful. I'm also going to touch on the risks of not using Section 75 data, and also some of the terminology that we've been using already this morning. But where I'm going to start is, what is Section 75 trying to achieve? And it may sound like a simple question, but quite often I think we get caught up in perhaps the bureaucracy of it, or the forms and the pieces of paper. So just to remind ourselves, Section 75 is trying to use policy to try to improve or make a difference to inequalities that exist for groups in society. It's really a tool to stop and think. When you're developing your policy or your service or taking a decision, you want to stop and think about how could you do things differently that might address some of the inequalities that exist in society. So in the picture that I'm showing in the slide to the left-hand side, it's not about treating everyone the same. If you treat everyone the same on the left-hand side, it hasn't addressed the inequalities for these children. For some of them it has, for some it hasn't. But by looking at your policy and determining whether there are inequalities, you can actually think about how you could develop your policy maybe slightly differently or have an alternative policy that will address the inequality, in this case, being able to watch the sport. And what's the link to data? Well, Evelyn and Siobhan have already talked about that. You cannot understand what the inequalities are unless you have the data broken down, disaggregated, as we quite often say, but broken down by the Section 75 categories. That will tell you what you could do differently with your policy. So what does your equality scheme say about Section 75 data, and why do you need to know that? Well, Section 75, as you know, is a statutory duty, so your equality scheme must be implemented. And thank you, Siobhan, for highlighting that people should know what is in their equality scheme commitments, what their organisation has committed to. So the first reason you need equality data is you've committed to using data across the Section 75 categories for equality assessing, that is screening or equality impact assessment of all new and revised policies. So unless you have that data to hand or you know where to go and get it, it's going to prove difficult, and that's why we've developed this guide. You're also committed to monitoring and publishing the actual impacts of your policy. So you've screened and equality assessed it, you've decided on your policy and you implement it. You're then committed to monitoring across the Section 75 categories. What was the actual impact of that policy and publishing that information? Your organisation has thirdly committed to developing a Section 75 action plan, and that's based on another piece of jargon, an audit of inequalities, which is really just a determination of what are the inequalities in society that your organisation has the potential to impact upon. And that's another good resource for you in developing individual policies. What does your own organisation's audit of inequalities and action plan say? So what are the risks to not trying to find the relevant data that you need to equality assess your policies? So the risks of not using data means you could potentially be breaking your equality scheme commitments. And what that could mean in turn is that individuals could make complaints to yourselves and to the Equality Commission about your equality scheme and not using relevant data. The Commission can initiate investigations. They're called paragraph 11. People can take judicial reviews, as we're all aware. And also there's the potential reputational damage. That are you an organisation that is not interested in or doesn't want to look at what the equality and good relations implications of your policies are? Just get a drink. So what is in the Section 75 data signposting guide for you? As Evelyn and Siobhan have also said, it is a starting point, and I suppose I want to stress that the reason that we decided to develop this in partnership with NISRA was we talked to policymakers day and daily who were saying we just don't know where to go or where to start. That was the line that we heard. But it is by no means an end point. And as previous speakers have already said, it's so important that you look for other data, not through this signposting, but in particular, look within your organisation about what you've been monitoring. The guide itself, hopefully you've had an opportunity to have a look at it before today's session, but if you haven't, it's full of a wide range of information from NISRA, the Equality Commission, wide range of other public authorities, community and voluntary sector organisations, UK-wide equality authorities and international conventions. And all of the data, if you're looking at it online, it's easily navigated. There are clickable links which are underlined, but in addition to that, Every logo of an organisation is a live link. It's explained at the beginning, is a live link in itself, and that brings you to that organisation's research and policy page. And also, for taking the example of open data, they have a lovely colourful grid, which we have utilised and made into live links. So if you're looking for information on education, economy, whatever, you can click on that within the guide and it will bring you to that data source. So it's very easy to use. It's a useful starting point with live links, and it also provides you with a lot of background information, some of which I've touched on in my presentation today, but it gives you a lot more information on what we mean by organisational data, on what we mean by, or on what to do if there are gaps in data, and also what we mean by looking at the evidence and the information you already have about whatever the policy or service or decision is, and how you look at that through the Section 75 lens, as we call it. In terms of the contents, you won't be able to see the detail of the contents here, but what I wanted to highlight is that the guide itself is in 3 sections. The first section is key points, and if you're not going to read any further, it gives you a selection of important points that you need to be aware of around Section 75 data and the use of it. Section 2 is probably where a lot of people will go straight to, and that is the sources of data with all of those live links that I talked about earlier. And Section 3 is the advice and background section. As I mentioned, tells you much more the who, what, where, why, when, what you need to know around this subject area if you want to know a bit more. I just want to touch on, before I finish and hand over to the next speaker, a little bit about terminology. We talk in the guidance and we use the language of quantitative and qualitative data. And the quantitative we talk about in the guides, we just call that's the numbers, the numbers of people. In qualitative, it's about the stories. So you may not have quantitative information available, but you can certainly seek out the qualitative, talking to groups, talking to individuals, as Siobhan stressed the importance of that, and engaging groups affected by your service policy or decision. We also talk a lot about population level data and organisational level data. And in developing the guide, we had a lot of conversation about that because we all use different language around data and information. But what we mean by population level is, for example, the census type data. All of the data available from NISRA we would call population level, and the Equality Commission and many other sources. Organisational level is down to you. You are the policymakers, you are delivering the services and taking the decisions. And what's really important from today's event is to take away the understanding that when you are developing or revising a new service policy or taking decision, you need to think about where are the gaps in data, what monitoring mechanisms do you need to put in place in order to determine the actual impacts of that policy. And there's lots of information in this guide about what we mean by organisational level data and how you can approach that. So thank you very much for listening to me. I am now going to pass on to Eileen Crone, who is Principal Statistician from Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency. Eileen has worked alongside us to develop this resource and additional resources that Eileen will talk about today. So thank you very much, Eileen, and it's over to you.
Thanks, Patrice. Morning, everybody. First of all, I would just like to say thanks to the Equality Commission and Patrice for hosting this event this morning and giving NISRA the opportunity to show you how we can help you with your screening and equality assessments. As has been pointed out, these assessments require evidence, and this is where NISRA can help you, in particular, the population level Section 75 data. For those of you who don't know, NISRA is an agency within the Department of Finance, and as Siobhan said earlier, we're the principal source of statistics and social research in Northern Ireland. We have statistics posted throughout the government departments as well as non-departmental public bodies and local councils, and these statisticians are available to help you with your policy decisions and your screening and your impact assessments. So I really would encourage you to seek your statisticians out in your department. As well as looking at or asking your department statisticians for help, NISRA have also produced two helpful resources which I would really recommend that you look at. The first one is a paper on accessing NISRA population level Section 75 data, and the other one is an accompanying narrated PowerPoint presentation. The paper is available on the NISRA website, and the PowerPoint presentation is available on the NISRA YouTube channel. And as Patrice said, these links will be forwarded to you all after the session this morning. So why look at these two resources? Well, firstly, they will give you information on what population level data is available and that you can expect to get from NISRA. They also tell you how to access the information and also how you can request help, because we do appreciate that not everybody knows where all this information is. So this morning I would just like to take you over a few of the key messages which you would hope to get if you look at these two resources. So first of all, the NISRA website, www.nisra.gov.uk is a really good starting point, because this website contains links to all the data that NISRA produce. So the data is arranged in statistical themes, so you just click on the theme that you're interested in and it will take you through to the information that's available. Now, some of this information will be available on the NISRA website itself, but others will take you to the department that hosts that information. But another really good source of information that NISRA produce is on the Northern Ireland Neighbourhood Information Service website, or what we refer to as NINIS. So NINIS is a website that hosts small area statistical information for Northern Ireland, as well as Northern Ireland as a whole, and it contains a wide range of data sets which you can access or download as well. The narrated PowerPoint presentation, which I mentioned earlier, talks you through how to use NINIS and shows you how to search for any information that you're looking for. So in terms of what information is available and you can get from NISRA, so obviously the main one, and Patrice mentioned it earlier, was the census. I do appreciate it's probably, it's 2011, but the census holds a wide variety of detailed information, such as age, gender, marital status, disability, dependence, racial groups, and goes into quite detailed levels. But other data sets which would be of interest to you in your equality assessments and screening responsibilities would be population estimates by gender. These go down to quite small geographical levels and by 5-year age bands. Other information which NISRA would host would be benefits data, health data, employment data by disability, disease prevalence, and also useful one would be if you look at the health and disability domain within the Northern Ireland Multiple Deprivation Measures 2017, you get some useful information there as well. So the resources that I mentioned there contain useful tips on how to access the data and how to navigate NINIS. But I would also just like to highlight this morning as well that we do run training courses for NINIS. These were available in Colby House before COVID, but we're now actually running them online. They're free and they're open to everyone. So please, if you think NINIS would be a good source and you're not sure how to navigate it, if you email info@nisra.gov.uk and say that you would like to attend a training course, we can arrange that for you. I would also just like to say, and as Siobhan mentioned, your statisticians in your department are a really good source of help. So that's useful if you know that that department produces the information and you know where your query lies. But if you're unsure of who or what department produces the information, if you send your query to info@nisra.gov.uk, I head up the dissemination branch and we manage that mailbox. We will look at your query and we will direct it to the relevant branch or relevant statistician who will then be able to help you. So really this morning it's really just a quick overview of the two resources that we have produced to try and help you with your Section 75 responsibilities. The main message I would say is that we're there to help, and please contact us if you have any queries at all, and we'll try our best to point you in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Eileen. That's really, really helpful. I can highly recommend a number of resources that Eileen referenced. The 10-minute presentation that brings you through the NISRA website is really useful, and we'll be sending that out to you in the chat today, all being well, but also in an email after the event. I've also been on the NINIS training. I didn't know what NINIS was, and it's really great training. It doesn't take too long and well worth attending. So thanks so much, Eileen. I think the mailbox could be inundated after today's event. Please, just on that, before I introduce the next speaker, please submit any questions. You've got the experts here, Eileen and Estelle and Deborah, so please do submit some questions for our Q&A towards the end. I'd now like to introduce Deborah Howe, my colleague, Senior Policy Officer from the Equality Commission, who is going to tell you a little bit about the policy and research information that's available from the Commission. Thanks very much.
Good morning, everybody. As Patrice said, my name is Deborah Howe. I'm a Senior Policy Officer at the Commission. I have responsibility for areas including our education, housing and participation in public life, public policy areas. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about the information and data sources that you can find on our website. As you would expect, the information that you will find there is focused on our statutory remit, so any of the issues considered will come from an equality perspective. My contact details can be found on the more detailed presentation that's going to be circulated later. Please feel free to contact me if you have any queries or want any further information. If I can't answer it, I will signpost you on to any other colleagues. You'll also find in that presentation hyperlinks, which should make it easier to navigate around and get a sense of where information can be found. So, the information and data sources that the Commission has, you will find some primary, quantitative and qualitative research on the Commission's website, but you will find a lot of policy and research analysis. And during this short presentation, I will talk about both. So first of all, where to find the information. If you go to our homepage, you will see there are 3 columns. Our information is on the one on that slide, addressing inequality, the green section. If you click on that, you then come through to addressing inequality. And on that page, you will see 9 boxes. And these really align mostly to public policy areas such as employment, health, housing, education. When you click on those boxes, within each of them is a huge amount of information covering our research input, policy recommendations, news, publications, consultation responses, all of that information. You will also find along the bottom row of those pages the different Section 75 grounds. So if you want specific information on a particular ground, like gender or race, you can find information. You'll find new information as well within this section on your rights after Brexit, which is a section which looks at the implications of Brexit and the work that we are doing in that through our new dedicated mechanism. So to talk about very briefly some of the data and information sources that you can find. As regards primary research sources, some examples include our annual public opinion survey, which is a survey of 500 individuals to ask questions around attitudes around workplaces, education, discrimination. So you'll find that information. Also, you can find the annual Fair Employment Monitoring Report, which is our analysis of each year's Fair Employment Monitoring returns. And this provides data on 560,000 workers broken down by gender and religion in the public and private sectors. So as regards policy and research analysis then, within the website, you will find this information across the 9 public policy areas in the boxes and also by ground, as I said, on the bottom row. A key and central point to all of our work is that it is robust. So in any of the policy and research analysis, you will find a huge amount of information where we will strive to find the best possible information to ensure that any recommendations or findings that we have are robust, looking at Northern Ireland data if available, or more broadly if necessary, including sort of at international standards. So an example of our work was our key inequalities work, and this looked in significant detail around inequalities in education, housing, participation in public life and employment. This work took place at 3 different levels, and at each level there was a great deal of internal and external stakeholder engagement, checking and feedback to make sure that anything we were saying or that others were saying on our behalf was robust. So the first level was a literature review done by academics. So in the different areas, it was like Queen's or Ipsos Mori, the University of York undertook that work for us and produced a huge literature review across the 9 Section 75 grounds, looking at inequalities in particular areas such as education or housing. Our research team then took that work and produced it as a key inequality statement, where they did their own analysis to add to that and produced a statement on key inequalities with a very robust evidence base to justify why the Commission felt these were key inequalities. The work then moved to my team, which was looking at policy recommendations and developing them, which are broader than the key inequality statements, using the evidence base of inequalities and really what we believe needs to be done to tackle those inequalities and to build on that evidence base that we have. So that's my presentation. In summary, on the Commission's website, you will find some primary data, but a significant body of research and policy analysis, both by public policy area and by Section 75 ground. And just to finish, if anyone needs any further information, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. That was really, really useful. I know I work in the advice section of the Equality Commission, and we regularly, in queries from policymakers, we would regularly send them links to all of that data and information. So that's why all of that is included in the data signposting guide, and all of the sections that Deborah referred to have specific links within the guidance. So thanks very much for that, Deborah. I would now like to hand you over to Dr. Estelle Lowry. Estelle has a background in public health, and she has a keen interest in understanding social inequalities in health. Estelle currently works in Queen's, developing and promoting the Northern Ireland Longitudinal study, NILS for short, nice acronym, and I'm going to hand over to Estelle now to tell us a bit more about that. Thanks very much.
Okay, hi everybody, and thank you for giving me this opportunity today to talk about the Northern Ireland Longitudinal Study, or we'll refer to it as the NILS for short. So I know not everyone is familiar with this data set, so I just wanted to start today by telling you a little bit more about it. In short, it is a wide-ranging database of people and their major life events, which stretches back decades. But I just want to illustrate this with a bit of an example so you can see what I mean. So let's take a woman, for example. We'll call her Lucy. She's 37 years old and currently living in Northern Ireland. So we can look right back to 2001 when she was 18 years old. We can see that she went to university in Great Britain. She moves back to Northern Ireland. She gets married, buys a house. We can even see information about that property and the area that she has decided to move to. She has a baby, starts a new job, and as her family is growing, we can see that she moves house again to a slightly bigger property and a little bit more outside the city. So that's Lucy's story told by administrative data so far. And with the NILS, we can actually see the stories of about 1/3 of the Northern Ireland population in this way. So it can be used to look at important social issues and inform public policy. So as I say, because it is a linked administrative database, it does contain a wealth of information, which I'm not going to go into everything today, but I do want to point out the information specific to Section 75 categories. So this mainly comes from the census, which I know Eileen has already talked about, but we do have responses then to the religious beliefs, racial groups, age, marital status, sex, disability and dependence. The only two we don't really have are political opinion and sexual orientation. However, the new census this year will have an additional question about sexual orientation, so this is maybe something we can look at in the future. The 2021 census will actually be added into the NILS when that's available. So the NILS has previously been used for Section 75 related research, and that was carried out by the Department of Health to look at how mortality rates differ between the different Section 75 groups. And you can actually find a description of this study, the methods that were used to conduct it and the findings, together with all other past and ongoing projects which are NILS related on our website. And as Patrice says, she will send out the resources, so you'll find our website and contact details there. So due to the nature of this data set, which you can probably imagine, so it is free to use, but it's not exactly publicly available in order to protect the confidentiality and the integrity of the information. There is an application process which is involved, and access is only to be gained via a secure setting. However, please don't let this put you off. Full details can be found on the website about the whole process, and if you do give us a call, we're happy to talk you through it from start to finish. But just while I'm here, I wanted to mention an alternative pathway which you could use, and it may be less daunting, especially if you're just starting to use the NILS data. So one possibility that we do really encourage is collaboration or co-produced research, especially with a more experienced researcher. The NILS team does have a list of active NILS researchers and their research interest, so they could potentially match you up with someone relevant. Or if you aren't aware, NISRA actually has an administrative research unit. This was established in 2018. And they're really keen to build Section 75 needs into its research over the coming years, and particularly in support of Programme for Government. So again, that could be a good match if you do have a research idea. So I know this has really been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully you have learned firstly about the existence of the NILS today, if you weren't already aware of it, and maybe you've learned something about the NILS and what it can actually do for you. So if anything that I've said has caught your interest, or if you want to follow up on anything, please don't hesitate to contact either myself or the NILS team. I didn't really mention about the team, but we're actually based across NISRA and Queen's, so both organisations. We're very happy to help out and discuss any ideas you may have. So thank you, and back to Patrice.
Thank you very much, Estelle. I have to admit that before we started working on the publication, I hadn't been aware of NILS, and it has been a real eye-opener to hear and see the data that is available from the study. So thank you very much for that, Estelle. It also, just what you said about opportunities for research, I think that will be very enlightening and interesting to a lot of policymakers if they're in need of Section 75 data in a particular area, around your study, to have that conversation with yourselves. So thanks very much. We now have a short amount of time for some questions. So I'll take, the first one is for Eileen. Eileen from NISRA, if there aren't tables and data that I'm looking for, can I ask NISRA to develop them?
Thanks for that question. I suppose it depends on if they're available and it's easy for the team to kind of produce it in a different format, and it's all down to resources. It could be available in a different format. So I think the best thing in that case is actually just to contact either the general email box or the department statistician and put your query to them, and they'll be able to answer on that specific query, because each query will depend really on what information is available. And even if it's not available, how difficult is it to create that new data set? So I suppose every question is individual. So just put your query to the department statistician who's responsible for the information. But potentially, yes, it could be, depending on a lot of things.
That's great. Thanks, Eileen. And one for Estelle. Estelle, could someone who isn't a researcher be able to access or use the data that's available from NILS?
So technically, yes, as long as you can comply with the Safe Researcher like accreditation process. So that involves getting your disclosure NI, and you can do the course that's free and it's led by NISRA. So I think that's like a half-day course. But if you do want to like embark on a research project or to use the NILS and you don't really have any experience of it, we would probably recommend teaming up with a more experienced researcher, just as that'll help you get started and navigate like the technicalities of the data. But there are always possibilities, so do contact us if you want to start using it, and we can try and help you come up with the best solution.
That's great. Thanks, Estelle. There's a question here about what do I do if I can't find Section 75 data related to my policy or service area, which I'm happy to deal with. And I suppose the first thing that we would suggest is that you look at the data that you have through the Section 75 lens, as we call it. So you may have held consultation events and not specifically asked Section 75 groups, but people may have said issues around disability or gender that you can draw out from the data that you already have. In terms of gaps in data, the screening form or EQAA prompts you to identify any gaps in data and to set up monitoring mechanisms to address those gaps in data so that next time round you have that. But that's not a reason not to look for the data this time round. And it's important to, in those circumstances, speak to all of the people who have addressed the webinar today in terms of utilize them in terms of their knowledge and expertise, because you may just not be aware of where the data is. And also, this is where qualitative data is really, really important. Speak to relevant groups, ask, consult on and engage early and ongoing, as Siobhan said, engagement with Section 75 groups and individuals. So I suppose the short question is ask and go to people and try to find it. Deborah, could we ask you a question about, you mentioned that the Commission could be contacted about policy and research. What sort of support and advice can you provide to people who are viewing this webinar today?
Well, if anyone is doing some work and maybe has had a look at some of our policy recommendations or some of the research materials, if they need further information or sort of more detail on that, you can feel free to contact any of the officers, because each of the officers in the policy and research team will have quite an in-depth knowledge of particular public policy areas as they apply to the Section 75 grounds, and also the ground specific information. So there is a good body of expertise there that may be able to signpost or provide additional information if it's needed, or share some of the sources that we have and contacts that we have.
That's great. Thanks very much, Deborah. Just one final question, which I will deal with before handing over to Evelyn for the summary and close and next steps. What's the difference between screening and EQAA, Equality Impact Assessment? We've talked a lot about both this morning, and the difference really is that all new and revised policies need to be screened. That is an equality assessment, but that's looking to see what is the potential impact. Normally, people, or you're required actually to publish those screenings, but with an equality impact assessment, an EQIA, it's really a more detailed and thorough analysis where you have identified in screening that there's major potential impact, either adverse or the opportunity to promote equality, major impact with your policy or service. And in that situation, you go out to consult on your written down equality impact assessment, and you would consider mitigation and alternative policies. But we've a lot more information on that, which again we'll send out to you after the event today. So I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Evelyn Collins again to summarise the webinar this morning and to talk about next steps. Thanks very much, Evelyn.
Thank you, Patrice, and thank you to all our speakers this morning, Siobhan, Patrice, Eileen, Deborah and Estelle, for both sticking to time so well and providing your expertise and your perspectives on the importance of equality data. That's been very, and I hope all the participants are really both I found it helpful and informative, and really encouraged to redouble your efforts to make sure the work you are doing to develop public policy is based on good data, and including good equality data. The signposting guide really is what it says. It's a signposting guide. It's a starting point. It doesn't provide answers to everything, but it's a starting point for use, and certainly we hope you find it helpful. All the speakers have said and offered that they're available for advice, but also pointed out that advice is available within departments from NISRA colleagues and from your equality colleagues, equality unit colleagues within departments too. So in addition to Commission resources, there's plenty of support available. And many of the speakers have also emphasised the importance of establishing monitoring systems, so not only to use equality data in support of the development of policies, but also to track. And in some cases, we see there's still a fair bit of work to do on individual policy areas to track the impact. So in terms of next steps, I suppose it's, read your equality scheme and use the signposting guide are the obvious ones. We will, as Patrice said, be sending you out additional resources over the next day or so, including the videos and so on that our colleagues in NISRA and Longitudinal Survey and the Commission have kindly developed, along with a recording of this event. So we've captured everything this morning, and a short evaluation form because for us, evaluating what we do, particularly in webinars and these new ways we're all working, is very important. So I suppose to close, I want to thank again all the speakers this morning. I want to thank the Patrice and her colleagues in the Commission for organising this event, and most importantly, or just as importantly, not most, just as importantly, I want to thank you all for your interest and participation in joining us this morning. And I do hope you found it valuable, and I would encourage you very much to give us your feedback about the event and share what you've learned this morning with others in your department. So thank you very much, everybody, and stay safe, look after yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks.